Well, it's time now for our press review, and for that, I'm joined once again in the studio by Erin Ogunkiye. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Axie.
I imagine the passing of that very controversial immigration bill here in France is dominating French papers today.
Yeah, there are a lot of headlines this morning that are sure to cause headaches for the ruling party this morning, from the left and the right, really. Now, I'll start with Libération, which takes a look at a quote from Macron in 2022. You, speaking to voters, you elected me to create a barrier to prevent the far right from rising to power. I now know I will hold myself to that goal. And then you have Marine Le Pen yesterday saying, for the National Rally, the far-right party, the immigration law is an ideological victory. So a radical change in just a year. Now, the paper Libération tells us that in order to save this bill, Macron was forced to reach an agreement with the Republican Party, I quote, not even batting an eyelid at the xenophobic measures that they push for, and which have historically been championed primarily by the far right. L'Humanité, for its part, another left-wing paper, decries a sullied republic, accusing the government of compromising again with the far right on a, quote, shameful text that essentially puts in place welfare chauvinism, establishing a preference that is for French-born citizens over foreigners. The paper saying that Macron, who once claimed to be a barrage, the last line of defense against Marine Le Pen, has now ended up elevating her, really. And then Mediapart, on that note precisely, goes even further than that piece in L'Humanité. The headline to the special on its homepage reading, and there you have it, the far right is now in power. The paper blasting a law that it says violates the most fundamental human rights. The editorial also comparing this law to some of the darker texts that were passed in France in the late 1930s in the lead up to the Nazi occupation of certain parts of the country, ultimately concluding that this law will not pass for us. We will not respect it because it does not respect our humanity.
And there are other papers here in France today more focused on how this immigration bill has divided Macron's government.
Yeah, that's right. I'll turn first to L'Opinion, Haxi, which is kind of a centrist to right paper. They say that it's created an all-out crisis for Macron, especially as more leftist members of his party are now threatening to step down. Now, among them are three ministers, including the health minister, who actually submitted his letter of resignation late last night after that law passed. Now, for this paper, then, it's the end of Emmanuel Macron's both-sidism, which looked to kind of go beyond transcend the left-right divide. The paper saying that left-right divide is now back, and it will mark phase 2 of his second mandate. Right-wing paper Le Figaro is super interesting because even though its editorials often express really very harsh anti-immigration opinions, that some would really deem far-right, this time it actually doesn't say much about the law itself, as much about the law itself as it does about the process that it went through to finally be passed. Le Figaro attributes the success to the Republican Party, which it says turned a weak text into an offensive law, a law on the offensive, rather. The editorial adding that the final result is crystal clear proof that Macronism is a synonym for inconsistency.
And we stay here in France for your next story, Erin. The star actor JeanDenis Depardieu, he's been accused of yet another sex crime by another woman.
Yeah, and this time by a Spanish journalist who filed a criminal complaint then in Spain against the French actor, claiming that she was sexually assaulted when she was interviewing him in Paris about 30 years ago. Now, it's important to make a point about the wording of her accusations. She initially described it as assault, though Spanish police later chose to qualify it, to describe it as rape. That's because Spain's sexual consent law, which was passed last year and which is really hailed as a kind of progressive achievement for women's rights in Europe. The charge of sexual assault in that text includes a vast array of crimes, which spans from online abuse and groping all the way to rape. Now, nonetheless, Depardieu is unlikely to face charges over these accusations because the events have already passed the statute of limitations here in France in any case. And I'll add, Haxi, briefly, that revelation comes as another household household name star figure here in France has been placed under formal investigation for accusations of sexual assault, rape, to be more specifically. That's Patrick Poivre d'Arvor, who was a star television anchor for decades here. Now, he has been accused of raping a fellow journalist in 2004. I'll also mention that no less than 50 women accuse him of various sex crimes, including 12 for rape. One of them was even a minor at the time that the accusations occurred.
We move now away from France to the US, Erin. US papers weighing up the consequences of the Colorado Supreme Court deciding that the name of Donald Trump will not appear on the 2024 presidential ballot.
Yeah, the New York Times tells us that this ruling, no matter how bad it sounds, how ominous it sounds, at least for Donald Trump and his supporters, it actually gives the former president somewhat of an escape route. That's because this ruling will only stand in place at least until January 4th. And if Donald Trump does take the case to the Supreme Court, which he's already said he will, it means that his name will remain on the primary ballot pending a decision. Now, this piece reminds us as well that the Colorado Supreme Court decision has no shortage of experts, of legal experts, and who are not necessarily Trump fans, who doubt whether or not this judgment will be upheld in the Supreme Court. The Times says that these justices will be grappling with the case's many interlocking legal issues, which are novel, complex, and very consequential, noting that courts in other states have already come to different conclusions than this Colorado Supreme Court on the very same questions. Now, precisely on that note, the Washington Post says that courts elsewhere, again, are also considering 14th Amendment-based challenges to Trump's bid to run again. As a reminder, the amendment includes a provision which prevents people who have participated in an insurrection from holding certain offices. That's the justification, again, that this Colorado court used. But similar cases have already been argued in Minnesota and in Michigan. Courts there have previously declined to remove Trump's name from the primary ballots, even though they did look at the situation through the lens of this 14th Amendment provision. A Texas tax consultant is also trying to file lawsuits based on a similar claim. But for now, in Texas, obviously a deeply red state, that's gained little traction. So it certainly doesn't seem, when you look into these other cases, to be the catastrophe that a lot of Trump critics are hoping for.
And Erin, you're going to be finishing with something of a word of warning to tourists.
Yeah, it is in the form of a roundup of some of the worst behavior from visitors in this year of 2023. As it comes to a close, this is from CNN, which gives us a pretty good summary of this year's worst offenders. They did things like take semi-naked photos at a sacred site in Bali, Indonesia. They drove a car across a fragile medieval and pedestrianized bridge in Florence, Italy. They even carved their names onto the Colosseum in Rome, claiming they didn't know how old the 2,000-year-old structure was. Italy does seem to have suffered, in particular, a lot of these bad tourist offenses, if you will. I wonder if that'll lead to stricter laws for tourism in Italy in 2024, as we've seen in other places like the Netherlands.
Erin Agunke with today's press review. Thank you very much.